They say hospitals never sleep. Lights buzz overhead, machines beep in the distance, and the smell of antiseptic lingers no matter where you go. But when you're working the night shift, there's something about those long, empty hallways that feels wrong. I used to tell myself it was just my imagination. But after what I experienced in the basement of St. Helena's Hospital, I know for sure some places are never meant to be disturbed. I was a nurse, working nights because the pay was better, and honestly, I liked the quiet. Most of my co-workers avoided the graveyard shift. Too creepy, too exhausting. The first time I was asked to go down to the basement, it was just after 2:30 a.m. Supplies were running low, and the storage closet upstairs had nothing left. My supervisor, Marcy, told me, "Go down to the basement. We don't usually store things there anymore, but you'll find what you need." The way she said it, hesitant, almost reluctant, made me uneasy. Still, I grabbed the old brass key and headed toward the service elevator. The ride down felt longer than it should have. When the doors opened, the smell hit me first. Damp concrete, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The basement hadn't been used in years, except for storage. I stepped out, flashlight in hand. The overhead lights flickered weakly, some dead, some buzzing. Long corridors stretched out, lined with old gurneys, broken IV stands, and cardboard boxes stacked against peeling walls. My footsteps echoed. The silence pressed in, heavy, unnatural. And then I heard it, a faint dragging sound like something heavy being pulled across the floor, coming from the old morgue wing at the far end. I froze, holding my breath. Maybe it was a janitor. Maybe someone else had come down here. But deep down, I knew. Nobody volunteered to come down here unless they had to. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I followed the sound, each step echoing louder in the empty hall. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, catching the edges of rusted doors and old medical signs. Finally, I reached it. The morgue. The door was old and heavy, a chipped white with faded letters that read, "Authorized personnel only." The dragging sound had stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I reached out to touch the handle, cold, almost freezing. And then, from the other side, a loud bang shook the door. I stumbled back, heart pounding, flashlight trembling in my grip. My first thought was, someone's inside. Someone's locked in. But then the realization hit me. The morgue had been sealed off for years. Nobody was supposed to be in there. I backed away, forcing myself to breathe. I needed to grab the supplies and get out. No reason to linger. But as I turned to leave, I heard something else. Whispers. Soft, indistinct voices. Like a conversation happening just behind the morgue door. I strained to listen. At first, it was impossible to make out the words. Then slowly, they grew clearer. "Not supposed to be here. She's ours now." The voices overlapped, dozens of them, male and female, old and young. They seemed to seep through the cracks in the door, curling around me like smoke. I bolted, running down the hall, my shoes slapping against the floor. The whispers followed me, echoing louder until they faded as I reached the elevator. I slammed the button, hands shaking. When the doors opened, I rushed inside, not daring to look back. When I finally made it upstairs, I swore I'd never go down there again. But I was wrong, dead wrong. I tried to put that night behind me. I told myself it was just stress, exhaustion, an overactive imagination. Nurses on night shift always saw strange things, right? But 2 nights later, Marcy called me into her office. "Supplies again," she said, eyes avoiding mine. "You'll have to get them from the basement." My stomach dropped. I wanted to refuse, to say no, but something in her expression told me it wouldn't matter. Orders were orders. So once again, I found myself descending in the old service elevator. This time, I carried not just a flashlight, but a rosary my grandmother had given me years ago. I wasn't religious, but I needed something, anything, for courage. When the doors opened, the air was colder than before. My breath misted in the beam of my flashlight. I hurried down the corridor, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to glance toward the morgue. But then I noticed something different. The morgue door was open, not wide, just slightly ajar, enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. And from that darkness, the whispers drifted out again. "Closer. Come see us. Don't leave." My body screamed at me to run, but my feet betrayed me, carrying me toward that half-open door. The morgue smelled like chemicals and rot. My flashlight swept across stainless steel tables covered in dust, broken cabinets, and body drawers lining the far wall. Some drawers hung slightly open, as though disturbed. The whispers filled the room, circling me. I spun in every direction, but nobody was there. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending where light shouldn't fall. Then my flashlight flickered, and in that split second of darkness, I saw them. Bodies. Dozens of pale figures standing between the tables, their hospital gowns tattered, faces pale and sunken. Their eyes were wide, black voids, and their mouths moved in unison, whispering words I couldn't understand. When the light returned, they were gone. My heart thundered in my chest. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight, when I heard it. One of the body drawers slowly sliding open. The metal groaned, echoing in the cold air. I couldn't stop myself from looking. Inside lay a corpse, skin gray, lips cracked, eyes closed. But then with a shudder, its chest rose. It was breathing, and then its eyes snapped open. I screamed, bolting toward the door, but something grabbed my wrist. Cold, bony fingers wrapped around me, pulling hard. I looked down. Another body had risen from a table, its skeletal hand clutching me. Its face was inches from mine, jaw unhinging far wider than humanly possible. A chorus of whispers erupted into screams, deafening. I yanked free, stumbling into the hallway. My flashlight fell and rolled across the floor, its beams spinning wildly. The shadows in the hall stretched toward me, long arms reaching. I could hear them behind me, the dragging sound again, faster, closer. I sprinted, lungs burning, not daring to look back until I slammed into the elevator doors. My hands shook so badly I could barely press the button. As the doors creaked open, I threw myself inside, jamming the button for the top floor. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was the morgue corridor, filled with dozens of figures, standing perfectly still, watching me. After that night, I refused to go back. I told Marcy what I'd seen. Her face went pale, and for the first time, she looked sorry. She told me the truth. Years ago, during a power outage, the basement morgue's refrigeration system failed. Several bodies were forgotten, left unattended for days before they were discovered. By then, decay had set in. The staff who worked there swore the morgue was cursed. Patients who had died unexpectedly, whispers in the dark, shadows moving on their own. The hospital sealed it off, but still used it for overflow storage when absolutely necessary. "You're not the first to hear them," Marcy said quietly. "But once they notice you, they don't stop." My last shift at St. Helena's was a week later. I'd already decided to quit. No amount of money was worth that basement. It was a quiet night. Too quiet. Around 3 a.m., I stepped outside for air, trying to shake off the lingering dread. When I came back, the service elevator was waiting on the ground floor, doors open. Nobody had called it. Inside, scrawled on the back wall in something dark and smeared, were the words, "Come back." I left that night and never returned. But even now, sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear them. The whispers. She's ours now. Long highways at night feel endless. Just black asphalt stretching forever. Your headlights the only thing cutting through the dark. For truckers, those roads can become a second home, but they also become a trap. I used to think nothing could scare me after years of hauling freight across the country. But one night, I stopped at a lonely truck stop off Route 47 and learned that some places aren't meant for the living. It was late November, around 2 a.m. I'd been driving since dawn, my eyelids heavy, the drone of the engine hypnotic, when I saw the faded sign that read, "Gas, food, restrooms, 1 mile." I didn't hesitate. The truck stop sat alone, surrounded by nothing but empty fields and dark woods. The neon sign buzzed weakly, only half lit. The word GAS flickering on and off. I pulled in, parking near the pumps. The place looked deserted, no other trucks or cars in sight. The convenience store glowed dimly under yellow lights, its windows smudged and grimy. Inside, the air smelled stale, like old coffee and dust. Behind the counter stood a man. Or at least, I think it was a man. Tall, gaunt, with skin stretched too tightly over his face. His eyes were shadowed, and when he smiled, it felt wrong, like he'd forgotten how. "Long night, huh?" he rasped. His voice was dry, brittle, like sandpaper. I nodded, trying to stay polite. "Yeah, just needed fuel and a coffee." He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me with that strange smile. Finally, he said, "We don't get many visitors this late." I grabbed a coffee from the pot near the back. It was lukewarm, bitter, but better than nothing. As I turned, I noticed something odd. The shelves. Most were empty. The few items left were old, dusty cans, faded chip bags, candy that looked years past expiration. I set the coffee on the counter and handed him a few bills. His hand brushed mine as he took the money, and I swear his skin was ice cold, clammy, like touching something dead. He slid my change across the counter without looking. Instead, his eyes fixed on the window behind me. "You should leave soon," he whispered. "They don't like it when people stay too long." A chill ran down my spine. "They?" I asked, but he didn't answer. He just smiled again, wider this time, showing too many teeth. I shook it off, deciding I'd just fuel up and get the hell out. Outside, the night felt heavier, the air colder. As I pumped gas, I noticed movement at the far end of the lot. A truck had pulled in silently, though I hadn't heard an engine. It was old, maybe from the 70s, its paint rusted, headlights dim. The cab door creaked open and a man stepped out. His face was pale, gaunt, like he hadn't slept in decades. He moved stiffly, walking toward the convenience store without looking at me. Then another truck pulled in, and another. Within minutes, the lot was filling up, ancient rigs with dead headlights, each one carrying a driver with the same hollow, lifeless stare. I froze, hose still in my hand, as one of them turned toward me. His eyes were black pits, empty of anything human. And then, in a voice that sounded like wind through a grave, he said, "You don't belong here." Panic surged. I dropped the hose, jumped back into my cab, and slammed the locks down. My hands shook as I turned the key. Thank God, the engine roared to life. But when I looked in the mirrors, my stomach dropped. The trucks surrounded me, parked in a perfect circle. Their headlights flared on, blinding white, all aimed at me. In the glare, I saw them. Dozens of figures standing between the trucks. Pale faces watching, mouths moving silently. Their lips whispered words I couldn't hear, but somehow I felt them. The same words over and over. Stay with us. Stay with us. Stay with us. I slammed the horn, floored the gas, trying to break through the circle. But the trucks didn't move. The lot stretched longer than before, as if the exit had pulled away. No matter how fast I drove, I couldn't reach the road. It was like being trapped in a loop. I killed the engine, chest heaving, sweat running down my face despite the freezing night air. I didn't know what else to do, so I looked back toward the store. The attendant was still standing there. But this time, he wasn't behind the counter. He was outside, standing perfectly still in front of the glass door, watching me. His head tilted slightly, like a bird studying prey. And then, without moving his lips, I heard his voice inside my head. You can't leave yet. They've chosen you. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart pounding. Chosen me for what? I muttered to myself, though I already knew I didn't want the answer. That's when the whispering began again. Not from him, but from all around. The truckers, their mouths hanging open, whispering in unison. Join us. Join us. Join us. The sound was inside the cab, crawling under my skin, scratching at my skull. Desperate, I threw the door open and ran. Not toward the exit. It never seemed closer. But back to the store. Somehow, my gut told me if I didn't confront the attendant, I'd be stuck there forever. When I stumbled inside, he was waiting. The shelves looked different now. The food wasn't dusty. The drinks were fresh, glistening under clean lights. The store looked brand new. But when I glanced at the windows, my blood froze. The parking lot wasn't outside anymore. Instead, beyond the glass stretched an endless black void. No trucks, no pumps, no road. Just nothing. I staggered back. What is this place? I demanded. The attendant's smile widened, impossibly, his jaw stretching. It's where the lost ones stop, he said. The ones who drove until they died, never making it home. They come here to wait, and now you've joined them. I ran for the door, but when I pushed it open, icy wind hit me, and I was back outside in the parking lot. The circle of trucks closed in tighter. Their engines growled, rumbling like thunder. The drivers stepped closer, surrounding me. Their skins sagged, some with deep wounds, others with bones jutting through torn flesh. I realized they weren't just ghosts. These were the remains of truckers who had died on the road. One reached for me, his nails long and broken. His voice was a guttural growl. You'll drive with us. Forever, I shoved past him, running blind. My boots slipped on gravel as I sprinted toward the dark woods beyond the lot. Branches tore at my arms, but I didn't care. I just ran. Behind me, the sound of dozens of footsteps followed. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes, hours. The woods seemed endless. But finally, through the trees, I saw headlights. Real ones this time. A 2-lane highway. I burst out onto the asphalt, waving my arms like a madman. A passing semi screeched, brakes screaming, stopping just in time. The driver jumped out, cursing. He was young, normal-looking, confused. Jesus, man, you trying to get yourself killed? I was sobbing, trembling, pointing back at the woods. The trucks! They're coming. We have to go. But when I looked back, there was nothing. No woods, No truck stop, just open fields stretching under the moonlight. The driver stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You need help, buddy? Hop in. I'll take you to the next town." I climbed into his cab, still shaking. He drove, humming to himself, radio crackling with static. For the first time in hours, I let myself breathe, until I glanced at the dashboard. The CB radio light flickered, and through the static, a voice whispered, "Stay with us." And in the side mirror, far behind us on the empty highway, I saw headlights, dozens of them, closing in. Malls are strange at night. By day, they're full of noise, children laughing, cash registers ringing, people rushing from store to store. But when the sun sets and the last lights go out, the mall becomes a cavernous tomb, every sound echoing too loud. I worked security at Westfield Crossing Mall for 3 years. The pay wasn't great, but the job was simple. Patrol, check doors, monitor cameras. I used to think the creepiest thing about the job was the silence, but then the mannequins started moving. It was a Thursday night, around 11 p.m. I was the only guard on duty. The cameras buzzed on their old monitors, showing empty hallways, closed storefronts, and dark food court tables. I took my flashlight and began my rounds. The place always felt bigger at night, like the walls stretched farther apart. Every footstep echoed too long. I passed a clothing store, La Mode. The mannequins stood posed in the window, dressed in winter coats and scarves. Nothing unusual. I kept walking. But when I turned the corner and glanced back, something was off. One of the mannequins had its head turned. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the angle just looked different from this side. But no. I was sure it had been facing forward when I first walked by. I shook it off, telling myself I was tired. Back in the control room, I scanned the monitors. Most of the screens showed static or dark halls. But one caught my eye. The feed for La Mode. The mannequins weren't standing in the window anymore. They were closer to the camera. I leaned forward, squinting. 3 of them stood right near the glass, faces pressed almost against it, blank eyes staring directly at the lens. I rubbed my eyes, looked again. They hadn't been like that earlier. I grabbed my radio, thinking maybe someone had broken in and moved them, though I couldn't imagine why. I switched to the intercom and tried to sound casual. This is security. Whoever's messing around in La Mode, you need to cut it out." No answer, just static. I decided to check in person. My boots echoed as I approached the store. The glass reflected my flashlight beam, making it hard to see inside. Then the beam caught them. The mannequins were no longer in the display at all. They were scattered across the store floor, some standing, some leaning. One stood just behind the glass, its hand pressed flat against it, as if it wanted out. I froze, bile rising in my throat. My flashlight shook, and then I heard it. A faint, scraping sound inside the store. The mannequins began to shift. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their heads turned toward me. I stumbled back, heart pounding. My radio crackled with static, then a whisper. "Don't let them out." I ran back to the control room, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands trembled as I flipped through the camera feeds again. The mannequins were gone. Not just from La Mode, gone from every camera that showed them earlier. Empty store, empty hall. But then, on camera 7, I saw movement. The mannequins were in the hallway. 5 of them stood in a row facing the camera, heads tilted slightly, blank faces staring. My breath caught. I switched to camera 8. Now there were 8 of them. Each camera I flipped through showed more, spreading through the mall, getting closer to the control room. I locked the door, whispering to myself, "It's not real. It's not real." But then something tapped on the glass window of the control room. I turned slowly. A mannequin's hand was pressed against it. The tapping grew louder. First one hand, then 2, then 3. Soon, the glass window of the control room was covered with pale plastic fingers, tapping in slow, rhythmic patterns. My radio hissed again. A voice, flat and distorted, seeped through the static. "We see you." I backed away from the window. The mannequins' faces pressed closer, their blank, featureless eyes inches from the glass. They weren't supposed to move. They weren't supposed to exist like this. I grabbed the phone on the desk, dialing 911 with shaking hands. 911, what's your emergency? This is Officer Miller, security at Westfield Crossing Mall. The line cut into sharp static. Then a voice I didn't recognize spoke through the receiver. "You shouldn't be here." I dropped the phone. I turned to the monitors again, praying for something, anything, to explain this. The feeds flickered. Some went dark. Others showed warped images, as though the mannequins were walking directly toward the cameras. On camera 2, I saw myself. Not live, not real, but a grainy version of me, sitting in the control room, hands covering my face. Except in the feed, I wasn't alone. A mannequin stood right behind me. I spun in my chair, swinging the flashlight beam wildly. Nothing. The room was empty. But when I looked back at the monitor, the mannequin in the feed was closer. Its hands hovered above my shoulders. The glass cracked. A spiderweb of fractures spread across the window. I screamed, grabbing my baton, useless against whatever this was. The mannequins began pounding, slow, heavy. Each hit rattled the walls. I backed into the corner, begging under my breath. "Please, God, no, no, no." Then silence. The pounding stopped. The hands vanished from the glass. My chest heaved. I forced myself forward, flashlight trembling. I peeked out the window. The hall was empty. For a moment, I almost believed it was over, until I heard the door lock click open behind me. The control room door creaked open. I didn't wait to see. I bolted, shoving past the doorway and sprinting into the hall. The mannequins were waiting. Dozens of them, standing perfectly still in the mall corridor. Some faced me. Others angled just slightly, like they'd been caught mid-step. Their arms hung at unnatural angles, fingers curled too tight. I ran anyway, weaving between them, shoving one so hard it toppled. It didn't hit the floor. It stayed upright, legs twisting, head snapping to watch me as I passed. I ran faster. My boots thundered down the hall, breath sharp in my chest. Behind me, plastic footsteps echoed. I reached the main atrium, where twin escalators descended to the lower level. I jumped onto one, sliding halfway down before catching myself. That's when I saw them. On the second floor railing, dozens of mannequins leaned over, heads tilted. They looked like a crowd watching a performance. As I stumbled down the escalator, their heads all turned in unison, following me. On the ground floor, I sprinted toward the food court. Chairs and tables loomed like obstacles. My radio crackled again, but this time, it wasn't whispers. It was laughter. Childlike, high-pitched, echoing. I hid behind a row of overturned chairs, gasping for breath. The mannequins didn't chase me immediately. Instead, they began to spread out, filling the food court, standing at odd angles, blocking every exit. I realized then, they weren't trying to kill me. They were hurting me, toward the center of the court. That's where I saw it. One mannequin stood apart from the rest. Taller, dressed in a black suit, no face, no features, just smooth, pale plastic. But when it lifted its arm, the others moved. It was leading them, controlling them, and it wanted me to see. The leader mannequin raised its hand. The others followed. Dozens of pale arms lifted in silence. Then, all at once, they pointed at me. The lights in the mall flickered, then went out completely. I was swallowed in darkness. When my flashlight cut back on, the mannequins were gone. Every single one. The food court stood empty, chairs and tables scattered, as though nothing had happened. My heart hammered. I stumbled toward the exit, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook so badly I dropped them twice before I finally got the lock open. Cold night air rushed in. I staggered outside, gulping it down like I'd been drowning. Behind me, the glass doors of the mall reflected my pale face, and just faintly, in the reflection, I saw them. Mannequins, standing in the lobby, dozens of them, perfectly still, watching. The leader raised its hand again, and then the lights inside went black. I stumbled into the empty parking lot, lungs burning, legs threatening to give out. My car sat under the yellow glow of a single, flickering lamp. It was the only patch of light in a sea of shadows. I sprinted toward it, fumbling with my keys. Behind me, the mall loomed like a blackened tomb. For a moment, I let myself believe I was safe. Then I heard it. Plastic footsteps. Slow, steady, echoing across the asphalt. I turned, flashlight sweeping the lot. Rows of mannequins stood between the cars now. Dozens, maybe hundreds, filling the spaces, their smooth faces reflecting the lamplight. Everywhere I looked, silent white figures. They hadn't followed me out the doors. They were already here, waiting. I dove into my car, slamming the locks down. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the keys. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. Relief flooded me. Headlights cut across the lot, illuminating dozens of mannequins in their frozen poses. Some leaned against hoods, some crouched between bumpers. All of them turned toward me as the light hit them. I jammed the car into gear and floored it. Tires screeched, smoke rising from the pavement. I swerved between figures, clipping one. It spun across the asphalt, limbs twisting unnaturally before snapping back into place. The mannequins didn't break. They didn't shatter. They just kept standing. I sped toward the exit ramp, but when my headlights hit the driveway, they were already there. A solid wall of mannequins, shoulder to shoulder, blocking the only way out. I slammed on the brakes, tires screaming. My forehead nearly cracked against the steering wheel. For a moment, I froze. Then, a sound shattered the silence. Tap, tap, tap. I turned slowly. A mannequin's hand rested on my driver's side window. Behind it, dozens more surrounded the car. Pale faces pressed against the glass, smooth and unblinking. The tapping grew into pounding. The entire car shook under the force. "No!" I screamed, slamming the horn, revving the engine. The leader mannequin appeared in front of my hood, taller than the rest, its featureless head tilted down at me. It raised its arm slowly. All around, the others lifted their arms too. And then, my window spiderwebbed with cracks. I floored the gas. The car lurched forward, slamming into the wall of mannequins. But instead of toppling, they held firm. My tires spun uselessly. The smell of burning rubber filled the air. Hands smashed against the windshield, plastic fingers pressing against the glass until it bowed inward. One by one, the windows shattered. Cold night air rushed in, and with it, silence. The pounding stopped. I looked up. Every mannequin had frozen in place, arms raised, heads tilted, then darkness. The headlights cut out. The dashboard died. The entire world went black. When I woke, it was daylight. I sat slumped in the driver's seat, head pounding, mouth dry. The car door hung open. The lot was empty. No mannequins, no cracks in the glass. Not even a sign that I had driven through anything at all. The mall loomed silent behind me. Normal. Ordinary. I drove home in a daze, refusing to look in the mirrors. I quit the job the next day, told them I was sick, couldn't work nights anymore. I didn't care if they believed me. But sometimes, late at night, I see them anyway. Not in the mall, not in my dreams, in reflections. The glossy window of a store, the glass door of a diner, the rearview mirror of my car. They're always there, perfectly still, perfectly waiting, and always pointing. My name's Derek Cole, and for the last 6 years, I've worked the night shift at a small plastics factory in rural Ohio. The money wasn't good, but it was steady. My job was simple. Keep the injection molding machines running, do hourly checks, and log the data. Nights were quiet, lonely, and predictable. Or at least they were, until last winter. That's when the factory stopped feeling like a building and started feeling like a living thing. It started with whispers. I was walking past the biggest molding machine on the line, clipboard in hand, when I heard it. Help! Me! I froze. The machine roared and hissed, plastic pellets melting inside, hydraulic pistons clanking. I told myself it was just steam or maybe the hum of the motor mixing with my exhaustion. But as I leaned closer, the voice came again. Help me, Derek. It knew my name. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my clipboard. My heart hammered so hard it drowned out the machinery. Nobody else worked this shift. Nobody else was here. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was tired, maybe hallucinating. But then I noticed something worse. The temperature in the factory dropped. My breath came out in mist, and scrawled across the inside of the observation window of the machine, written in condensation, were the words, "We never left." The next day, I asked one of the older day shift workers, Charlie, about it. He frowned, scratching at his beard. You don't want to know, Derek. But since you asked, he leaned in. This place burned in 1979. Whole night crew trapped inside. They say the owners cut corners on fire escapes. Folks pounded on doors till the smoke got them. Management cleaned it up, rebuilt, never admitted a thing. I swallowed hard. Charlie gave me a long look. If you hear voices down there, don't answer. That's how they pull you in. The following week, things got worse. I was logging machine number 7 when it shut off by itself. Dead quiet. No power. Then the lights above flickered. Inside the machine's chamber, molten plastic bubbled and hissed, though the power was off. The observation window fogged. And in the mist, faces appeared. Dozens of them. Twisted, screaming, their features distorted like they were trapped inside the walls. They all spoke at once. Derek, stay with us. I ran. I tried to leave early that night, but when I reached the main exit, the door wouldn't budge. I shoved, pulled, slammed my shoulder against it. Nothing. That's when I noticed the padlock. An old rusted padlock that hadn't been there when I clocked in. Behind me, the machines groaned. Hydraulics hissed, metal clanked. And then came the sound that froze my blood. Footsteps, but not the heavy boots of a worker. These were uneven, dragging, wet. I ducked behind a forklift, peering through the gaps. Figures shuffled between the machines, charred, blackened silhouettes, their skin cracked and blistered, smoke rising from their bodies like dying embers. Their mouths opened in silent screams. One turned its head toward me. Even from across the factory, I could hear the wet rasp of its breath. I clamped my hand over my mouth, heart hammering. The figure twitched once, then began dragging itself closer. And then another joined, and another. A whole line of them, limping, burned beyond recognition, moving toward me. I bolted for the control room at the far end of the floor, slammed the door, locked it. Inside, the hum of machines filled the silence. My hands shook as I grabbed the phone. I dialed 911. Static. Then a voice whispered back, "You shouldn't have come here, Derek." I dropped the receiver. It swung on its cord, creaking softly. I backed into the corner, staring at the door. That's when the glass window on the control room door fogged over, and in dripping letters, a message appeared from the other side. "You're next." The factory was never silent, not really. But that night, the noise took on a different tone. The machines groaned as if they were breathing. Gears clanked in patterns that almost sounded like words. Steam hissed like sighs. I pressed my back against the wall of the control room, staring at the fogged glass door. Beyond it, shadows moved. Slow, patient, waiting. I grabbed the flashlight from my belt, my only weapon, and switched it on. The beam shook as much as my hands. The air grew heavy, smelling of melted plastic and smoke. Then, all at once, the machines roared to life. Every single one. Hydraulics hissed, pistons slammed, plastic melted. But no one had pressed start. The control room lights flickered. The door handle began to turn. I braced myself against the door, pushing with all my weight. But whatever was on the other side pushed back, slow and relentless, like it had all the time in the world. Then, through the glass, I saw it. A burned hand, blackened, split skin, bone peeking through, fingers curled around the handle. The stench of charred flesh seeped into the room. I screamed and shoved harder. For a second, the force relented. But then, something icy brushed the back of my neck. I spun around. The room was empty. The lights died. The entire factory plunged into darkness, the machines roaring blindly in the void. I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam cutting through thick smoke that hadn't been there seconds ago. Shapes writhed in the haze, faces half-formed, mouths opening and closing without sound. I stumbled to the far corner, heart in my throat. The phone receiver swung slowly, creaking louder, faster, until it whipped violently against the wall. Then, silence. The machines cut out, the smoke cleared, and standing in the doorway of the control room was a figure. Not charred, not broken. A man in a factory uniform, clean, perfect. But his face was wrong. No eyes, no nose, just a melted plastic smooth surface. And when he opened his mouth, dozens of voices poured out at once. "Derek," the voices hissed, layered on top of each other. "You hear us. You see us. That means you belong to us." I shook my head violently. "No, I didn't do anything. I didn't." "You breathe in our air. You walk on our ashes. You turn the machines that killed us. You owe us." "I didn't even work here back then," I shouted. The figure tilted its smooth head. "Then pay for them." Behind it, more burned workers emerged, their eyes hollow, their mouths twisted open. "Join us," the voices whispered. "Feed the machines." The control room door slammed open, and unseen hands shoved me hard. I fell backwards, sprawling onto the factory floor. The machines had come alive again. Conveyor belts rolled, gears spun, molten plastic bubbled in vats. But they weren't producing parts. They were producing faces. Dozens of human faces, half-formed, stretched in agony, mouths frozen mid-scream as they slid down the belts and into bins. I scrambled to my feet, gagging. My boots slipped in melted plastic. The burned workers closed in, forming a circle around me. One reached out, its hand black and smoking. It pressed its palm against my chest. The pain seared through me, white hot. And in my head, a voice whispered, "One of us." I tore free and ran, lungs burning. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I had to move. The factory corridors twisted and stretched like a maze. Machines hissed and roared, guiding me deeper. Finally, I burst into the furnace room. The old incinerator loomed against the wall, rusted but still reeking of ash. Its door was open. Inside, flames roared, though no fuel burned. Whispers filled the room, louder now, overlapping, echoing inside my skull. Burn with us. Join us. Feed the fire. The shadows of burned workers crowded the doorway, blocking my escape. The only way out was through the flames. I backed away from the fire, shaking my head. No, I'm not dying here." The smooth-faced figure stepped forward, tilting its head. Its hollow voice echoed, "You already have." And suddenly, I wasn't in the furnace room anymore. I was back in 1979. Smoke choked the air. Flames licked the ceiling. Workers screamed, pounding on locked doors. Their flesh blistered, their lungs filled with smoke. And I was one of them. I clawed at the door, coughing, begging. The heat seared my skin. My vision blurred. A voice whispered in my ear, "Now you understand." I collapsed to my knees, coughing violently, the smoke of 1979 thick in my throat. My skin blistered, my hair singed. I clawed at the door with bloody nails, but it didn't budge. All around me, the other workers screamed. Their bodies twisted in agony, melting into the walls, their faces fusing with steel. And then, just as the fire consumed me, I jolted awake, back in the present. I was still in the furnace room. The flames inside the incinerator raged higher, licking the ceiling. But now, I wasn't alone. The burned workers stood in a half-circle around the fire. Their hollow eyes glowed like embers. And in the flames, I saw something worse. My own reflection, screaming, burning, begging for release. The smooth-faced figure stepped forward, its voice carrying over the roar. "You belong here, Derek. The fire chose you. The machines remember. The factory remembers." The walls shook. The machines roared as though alive. Conveyor belts rattled, pistons slammed. Then a deep metallic groan reverberated through the factory. The machines weren't just haunted, they were alive. The factory itself was a body, and the souls of the dead were its organs. The burned workers chanted, their voices blending with the hum of gears. "Feed the machines!" I ran. I don't know where the strength came from, but I bolted out of the furnace room, dodging the shadows that clawed at me. The halls twisted, unfamiliar. Machines lined the walls, their vents spewing hot breath. The faces molded in plastic turned as I passed, mouths opening in silent screams. The smooth-faced figure appeared again, ahead of me this time, blocking the path. It raised its hand, and the machines obeyed. A conveyor belt lunged from the wall, wrapping around my legs like a serpent. I fell hard, head slamming against the concrete. I screamed, kicking wildly, but the belt dragged me toward the open maw of a molding machine. Its chamber glowed orange, molten plastic bubbling inside like a hungry stomach. The voices thundered in unison. "One of us! One of us!" I clawed at the ground, nails ripping bloody furrows in the concrete. My flashlight skittered across the floor, spinning in circles until its beam landed on something metal. A crowbar. I lunged, grabbing it, swinging wildly at the conveyor. Sparks flew. The belt snapped, releasing me. I scrambled to my feet, swinging at the shadows, at the burned hands reaching from the smoke. They recoiled for a moment, hissing, but only for a moment. The smooth-faced figure tilted its head. "You cannot leave. The fire is inside you now." The workers surged forward, shrieking, their charred hands reaching. I ran again through corridors that twisted endlessly, until finally, I saw it. The exit door. I threw myself against the door, pounding, screaming, and this time, it opened. Cold night air hit me like salvation. I stumbled outside, collapsing onto the gravel lot. Behind me, the factory stood silent. The machines quiet. The smoke gone. It looked normal. Empty. I laughed, half crazed, tears streaming down my face. But then, my skin began to itch. Burn. I yanked up my sleeve. My forearm was blistered, skin cracked and blackened like it had been burned. And when I exhaled, smoke poured from my mouth. The fire wasn't behind me anymore. It was inside me. I quit the job the next morning, packed up my life, and left town without a word. But leaving didn't help, because wherever I go, I hear it. The hum of machines even in silence, the hiss of steam even when nothing's there. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see the smooth-faced man, standing at the foot of my bed, his head tilted, his voice 100 whispers at once. "You can't run, Derek." Factories are everywhere, and every machine is hungry. I don't sleep much anymore, because I know the fire is waiting. And one night soon, I'll wake up back inside that furnace. I'd been working the late shift at Miller's Gas and Go for almost 2 years. Out here, 20 miles from the nearest town, the nights were long, quiet, and lonely. The customers were usually truckers, farmers, or drifters passing through. They'd fill up, grab a coffee, maybe use the restroom, and leave. But that restroom, God, I hated that restroom. It was an old concrete block room built separate from the main store, out back near the dumpsters. The walls were stained, the light flickered, and the smell never really went away no matter how much bleach we used. Customers always complained about it. Some even said they'd rather wait until the next stop. But what made it worse wasn't the smell or the stains. It was the mirror. The mirror was cracked in the middle, a jagged line running down like a lightning bolt. We tried replacing it once, but every new mirror broke within days. My boss joked that drunks must be punching it, but I'd been there long enough to know better. Sometimes, when I went in to clean late at night, I'd catch something strange in that mirror. Not a reflection, but a movement, like someone standing just behind me. And when I turned, the room would be empty. It was 2:14 a.m. when a rusty van pulled up. The driver was a tall, rail-thin man in a filthy denim jacket. His eyes looked hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. "Restroom," he croaked. I nodded, tossing him the key on the big yellow plastic tag. He shuffled toward the restroom out back. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Too long. I stepped outside, shivering in the cool desert air. The van sat idling, headlights pointed into the empty road, but the restroom door was still closed. I walked over, knocked. No answer. I unlocked it with my spare key, pushing the door open. The light flickered overhead, the mirror was cracked, and the restroom was empty. The man was gone. I froze. Something was different. The mirror. The crack had spread wider, branching like veins, and there were words smeared across the glass in something dark and sticky. Don't look too long. My hands shook as I backed out, locking the door again. I told myself the man must have just wandered off into the desert. But I knew better, because as I walked back toward the store, I caught something in the corner of my eye. A pale face, pressed against the inside of the mirror, watching me leave. The next night, I tried to forget about it. I told myself it was exhaustion, or maybe someone messing with me. But at exactly 2:14 a.m., the same time, the restroom light flickered on by itself. I knew I hadn't given anyone the key. I grabbed the baseball bat from under the counter and stepped outside. The door to the restroom was wide open, swinging gently in the wind, and inside, the mirror was whole again. No crack, no writing, just a clean, perfect reflection. I stared at it for too long, longer than I should have, and then I blinked, and I wasn't in the gas station anymore. The air around me was damp, heavy, and reeking of mildew. I blinked again, but the gas station was gone. I stood in another restroom, the same shape, the same size, but not the same place. The walls were covered in black mold, dripping down like veins. The single light above flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The mirror in front of me was whole and gleaming, but it didn't show me anymore. Instead, it showed the store. I saw the counter, the humming refrigerators, the rows of chips and candy, and behind the counter, me. I stumbled backward, my chest tightening. The reflection wasn't just me standing behind the counter. There was a woman standing next to me. Her skin was pale, stretched too tight. Her eyes were nothing but black hollows. She leaned in close to the reflection of me, whispering something into my ear. But the real me, I felt nothing. I heard nothing. The reflection smiled. I didn't. A sound jolted me. Knock, knock, knock. I spun around. The restroom door shook violently as though someone was pounding from the other side. Then a voice, a low, ragged whisper. Don't look too long. My blood froze. It was the same words written on the mirror last night. I ran for the door, yanking it open. But outside, there was no desert, no gas station, only a long, endless corridor of restroom doors stretching in both directions, each one flickering with its own sickly yellow light. I slammed the door shut, breathing hard. The mirror shimmered, and now it showed something else. The drifter, the man in the denim jacket, the one who had gone missing. He was in another version of the restroom, pounding on his mirror from the inside. His mouth moved soundlessly, eyes wide with terror. Behind him, the pale woman crept closer. Her long, bony fingers reached for his shoulders. And then, darkness swallowed his reflection. He was gone. The mirror cracked again. The restroom light buzzed louder, almost deafening. And then, the woman appeared. Not in the mirror. In the room with me. Her jaw stretched impossibly wide, bones cracking as her face contorted into something inhuman. "You shouldn't have looked," she rasped. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping across concrete. I backed into the corner, clutching the bat like it could save me. "What do you want?" I choked out, her head tilted, twitching. "You take their place, or stay forever." Her words echoed in the rotten air. Take their place, or stay forever. I shook my head violently. No, I'm not. But before I could finish, the mirror shifted again. This time, it showed the gas station clerk's counter, my counter, and standing there staring blankly was me. Not my reflection, not my imagination. It was another me, already behind the counter, already living my life, and next to him, the woman, smiling, I felt the floor sink beneath my feet. The restroom door behind me creaked open on its own. The long hallway of endless restroom doors stretched out, even darker now, even more distorted. From each door, faint pounding echoed, hands, voices, cries for help. I realized they weren't random victims. They were all the missing travelers. Every drifter, every trucker, every lost soul who stopped here and never left. They weren't gone. They were trapped in the mirrors. The woman moved closer, her limbs jerking unnaturally, like a puppet controlled by broken strings. Her face hovered inches from mine, breath cold and sour. "You look too long," she hissed. "Now you belong." I swung the bat, desperate, screaming. The bat shattered the mirror into 1,000 glittering shards. For a second, I thought I'd won. But then, every shard lit up like tiny screens, and in each fragment, I saw myself. Hundreds of me, trapped, screaming silently. The restroom light went out. Darkness. When it flickered back on, I was no longer holding the bat, no longer standing in the corner. I was standing behind the counter again, looking out over the empty gas station. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The refrigerators hummed. The coffee pot gurgled. But I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I wasn't me anymore. I was a reflection. And in the glass of the cooler door, I saw her standing behind me, smiling, waiting for the next traveler.